Hello everybody, I'm the introverted astrologer and I'm delighted to be back with you today. I'm hoping you're all well and staying sane, and I have yet another rather contentious video to bring, and this involves a British political figure, Tommy Robinson. Recent weeks have seen a mass of news reports and posts on X from Elon Musk expressing strong opinions on politics in Europe and Britain. And this weekend just passed saw a march in London in solidarity for the release of Tommy Robinson. He is currently serving a jail sentence of 18 months in the UK for contempt of court. Elon Musk has expressed support for Tommy and made public statements to this effect. This all raises quite a few interesting questions. Can we see any kind of social prominence in Tommy Robinson's chart? I can see that he has one of the royal fixed stars interwoven in a very striking part of his nativity. And moreover, although he is currently in jail, his sentence will be over in 2026. And I can see a lot of changes coming for him in that year. I will put a gentle boundary in place, because this is a figure that arouses very strong opinions either way. I just need to set out the boundaries of this video. It isn't the purpose of my channel to express my personal political opinions. And so when I analyse this chart, I will be looking at the raw potentials contained in it. We all have a mixture of good and bad, and we work with these potentials as we mature and evolve during our life. I can't tell from a birth chart how much a person has evolved or learnt through their life experiences, because we all change and grow at different rates. So I'll be describing base materials that Tommy arrived with when he was born for this lifetime. With that, let's get cracking. If we tot up the planets, we can see that we have this overwhelming emphasis in fire signs and in mutable energy. So the overall signature is of Sagittarius, and indeed Tommy does have this immensely strong stellium in Sagittarius. Most of his personal planets are in the fire signs, with the exception of his Mars, which is in Earth. We can also see that the overall shape of his chart shows that almost everything is contained within a half circle. Because we don't have the exact birth time, I would be inclined to consider this as being a bucket shape. This moon is looking rather solitary on one side of the chart, and it could be anywhere up to 25 degrees of Aries. And so this is probably a person who wants to actively feel like they belong in society, but they don't necessarily want to conform to our mainstream societal views. It's more the case that they wish to be recognised by society for their own unique contribution. This more prominent moon handle might be the point which strongly influences the person, and so we could consider that Tommy Robinson is led by emotional impulses or beliefs, for better or for worse. Because we don't have an exact birth time, we don't know what his chart ruler is. We also have to disregard these houses. So let's start off by looking at his sun. The sun, which is representative of our consciousness, our life path, our ego even. And we have this most striking partile conjunction to Uranus against the backdrop of all this Sagittarian energy. And this really is striking. Uranus is the revolutionary, the rebel, the awakener, and we often find a big dollop of Uranus in the charts of people who are bringing a particular message, perhaps to awaken or stir up the populace. We can think of other famous people with Sun-Uranus conjunctions. So Trump, for example, has one caught up with his eclipse Sun-Moon opposition. Keir Starmer too has Sun-Uranus, although Pluto is more closely involved with his too. So Sun-Uranus people will not accept restrictions or authority over them. They can have quite a contrary streak. They need to be different, to be unique. This need is very strong, and they would often prefer people bend to their opinions than the other way round. They do also like to be recognised for being a one-off. We do have Mercury and Venus caught up with this too, and so we can be creative, certainly. We're probably quite subjective. We can express ourselves very well, and of course with all this Sagittarius background energy we're likely to be quite gregarious. Sagittarius is a fiery energy, and it's one which is very much taken up with optimism, with adventure, with seeking out the truth of a matter. Truth is very important to Sagittarian people, and they can hold some strong, deep beliefs. And so looking at all this, I think we could reasonably expect that Tommy Robinson would be intelligent and lively company. There would probably be this search for truth, an emphasis on ideals, on justice, and with Mercury and Venus involved with the Sun, we might also anticipate some subjectivity with this. What is the shadow side of Sagittarius? With all this emphasis on beliefs, Sagittarians may sometimes be self-righteous, perhaps overly attached to those beliefs. The chores of life can be quite tedious to people with a lot of fire. There's that need to do, to experience, and their attachment to personal freedoms can be intense, as can their involvement with their own belief system. Now, with all this Sagittarius energy, the position of Jupiter is going to be very important, because Jupiter is the ruler of Sagittarius. And here we can see that Jupiter is in the sign of Scorpio. It's the only water placement in this chart, and it's bringing in those extremes, a certain obsessiveness, but certainly some depth too. Caught up in this Sagittarian energy, we have a very important fixed star, and this is Antares, and it will be conjunct with this Mercury and Venus, well within tight orbs, regardless of what time of day Tommy was actually born. And Antares is part of the Scorpius constellation. It has quite a reputation. It's a binary star system. It's actually composed of two stars, and it's one of the brightest stars in the sky. It gives off a reddish hue, a little bit like the planet Mars. Now, it has traditionally been associated with qualities like malevolence, violence, self-destruction, accidents. It's also been identified as having a very keen military nature, and so there are strong strategic powers. There's courage, there can be foolhardiness, and people with this fixed star closely connected with their personal planets or their angles can seek out intensity. They might create life or death situations for themselves, and this is because, of course, the background energy is of Scorpio, which rules issues like transformation, intensity, life or death. And this means that natives who have it prominently placed in their chart may well refuse to let go of beliefs or what they perceive to be their life mission, for better or for worse. And because it is one of the royal stars, there's also that overlap with great success, potentially material prosperity too. A good resource, incidentally, for looking up the fixed stars, guidance on what orbs to use and locating them in your own chart would be astrologyking.com. Now, so far we're seeing streaks of great originality. There is an investment in the belief system. The presence of the fixed star Antares is adding that military fighting edge, possibly a potential for violence. Can we pick up any other shades of a fighting nature, of strong passion, of rashness, of leadership potential? Are there other signs that might hint at conflict or dissent? Let's look at this moon, which is also in a fire sign, regardless of the time of birth. We must also bear in mind that this moon is probably quite important because it stands away from the rest of the planets. This moon will be square to his natal Mars within 10 degrees, even if he was born at the extreme ends of the day. And so this Aries energy is again very independent, emotionally impulsive, pioneering. It seeks out action and adventure. But this addition with Mars is bringing in a more combative element. Mars rules this Aries energy, and so the moon is square with its own ruler and in a difficult aspect which suggests a combative and self-orientated streak. This particular Moon-Mars aspect has a poor reputation for interpersonal skills, at least until the person has matured enough to recognise how they can impulsively and repeatedly shoot themselves in the foot. There's a great defensiveness with this aspect. There is also this strong need for the ego to win, and so life can be a series of endless arguments, of problems with self-discipline, of demanding too much from other people and trying to gain the upper hand at all costs. We can be inclined to lash out and we can be aggressive, and I think we've got to remember this is Aries energy too, which is fiery and quick. Aries also has the reputation for putting itself first. Now this is the raw potential that we're talking about, and it is a difficult aspect with the moon, but as people mature they often curb the more extreme expressions of their natal potential when they realise that it gets in the way of them achieving the things they want. So we are developing themes of quite a fiery nature, perhaps aggressiveness, a truculence, a strong fighting spirit. But this Mars is interesting because it's in a sign where it is said to be exalted, and it's building further on the reputation of the fixed star Antares, because Mars in Capricorn can have this finely honed strategic bent to it. The energy is very structured. It's directed towards achieving ambitions, and it can be very hard-working, self-disciplined and tenacious. People with this placement can be ruthlessly ambitious and workaholic. We can see that this is softened somewhat with the sextile to Jupiter and the trine to Chiron, and so the part of the chart where we might see a strong sensitivity towards themes of justice and fairness, Mars is tapping into that. There are a couple of other reasons why this Mars is so interesting, and one of them is that the ruler of Capricorn is Saturn, and Saturn is in the very last degree of Libra. Libra is the place where Saturn is exalted though, and so I would anticipate a very powerful executive force here. And this Mars is very closely caught up with another fixed star. This isn't one of the major or royal fixed stars, but it does have interesting connections with military strength again. This is Deneb, and this is bringing in those themes of being able to command people, for success, for leadership qualities, and because there is such a lot of emphasis on commanding and leading, the star also brings in a reputation for being quite brash and shameless even in the pursuit of the things that we want. Pluto-Saturn can certainly give driving ambition, the determination and the persistence. And there are a few other reasons why Tommy's chart is interesting. Mercury, Venus and Mars are all moving a bit quicker than usual. Everything is moving direct apart from Chiron, and there are many inter-aspects in the declinations too, and so when we get clumps of planets together like this, we know that we are looking at a person who brings in strong abilities for some reason. Now, I'm most intrigued about 2026. As we know, Tommy Robinson will probably be in jail and in solitary confinement during this year, 2025. And from what I can see of this chart, I must be honest and tell you that this is not a chart that would necessarily cope well with solitary confinement. My initial assessment would be of somebody who really needs to communicate, somebody who uses discussion and argument with people on a constant basis. If they were operating on autopilot, we might anticipate a life filled with some noise, a degree of conflict, arguments, agitation, and all of this intertwined with very strong beliefs. It may be that if this person was forced to turn back in on themselves and to quieten down, to go within, they could actually transform this time of challenge into a golden opportunity. Quiet time is not something this person would normally seek out, I don't believe. Under normal circumstances, they are more likely to seek out leadership, action, friction, ego fulfillment. Now, assuming that Tommy Robinson is released early in 2026, what will this year hold for him? He's been in jail since late October 2024. It's an 18-month sentence, and so he may remain in jail until April of 2026. There are a lot of demonstrations for his release, and given the current overloading of the British prison system, we can't say for certain when he will be stepping outside prison walls again. He may be released earlier. But 2026 is very important for him. This is going to be the year when all the outer planets will finally be in fire and air signs throughout the year. Those of you who have big dollops of air or fire in your chart, these could be exciting times. And Tommy too has big chunks of fire and air. So where is he heading in the future? Of course, we don't have those important angles, but something that we can see is that Uranus begins to move into Gemini this year, actually, but it doesn't reach the degree of Tommy Robinson's natal Uranus and Sun until 2026. And because Uranus will year on year oppose its natal position and the Sun, and in time go on to oppose Mercury and Venus, we can anticipate some big changes coming up for Tommy. Uranus is unpredictable. We can't say which house it is currently travelling through, but we tend to have upsets or disruption to our life path. Potentially the career that we have chosen for ourselves, but to our outward expression in the world. Uranus throwing a curveball can be upsetting, disorientating, and I have no doubt that the opposition to his Sun as well will be strongly felt, and that is because there is this tight natal connection between the Sun and Uranus. However, in the same year that Uranus is doing this, Pluto in Aquarius will begin to sextile this Sun-Uranus conjunction too, across the elements of fire and air, which are seen as having a positive charge. We may find that we attract opportunities to ourselves without really trying. Pluto has the potential to bring us extra power to strengthen our position, to help us to transform and achieve the things that we would like. Transiting Neptune will be in Aries and will be trining this Sun-Uranus conjunction. And so there'll be opportunity for inspiration. Our intuition could be enhanced. Neptune can represent spirituality, and so people who are seeking out chances for self-improvement, for creativity, and for implementing practices or beliefs in our life that soften us somewhat. These potentials will be present in 2026 onwards too. Saturn in Aries will form ongoing trines with Mercury and Venus in 2026 too, bringing in structure and solidity, potentially in personal relationships, but in projects and our ability to bring new structures or ways of doing things into our life that will last. And so we have a host of transits for Tommy in 2026. The enormity of these powerful transits acting almost simultaneously cannot be understated. I wondered, is there anything happening in Tommy's progressed chart which backs up this time of many changes? And so here we have Tommy's natal chart in the centre, and around the edge in green glyphs we have his progressed planets. Progressions are a common tool which astrologers use, where we move one day forward in our ephemeris for every 1 year of life that the person has lived. I'm showing you February of 2025. At this time, Tommy Robinson is 42 years old. Now, I can't be precise to the month with these progressions, and part of the reason for that is because I don't have a birth time. Now, I mentioned earlier that there is only one planetary body in Tommy's chart which is retrograde, and that is Chiron down here. However, at this point in Tommy Robinson's life, Mercury has turned retrograde too. We don't often find changes of direction in our birth planets as we progress them over the years. It does happen, but it doesn't happen very often. And so when a progressed planet does change direction in this way, it marks a sea change within us. It's a time when we have an important shift on the inside within our own psyche, and it is always very significant. This Mercury changed direction in July of 2023. Now, I can't find any significant event to tie in with that precisely. There were indeed various demonstrations, police involvement around that time, because Tommy has led quite an active life. Our Mercury is how we process information, our thought patterns, our communication with the world, how we take in information from others. And so when Mercury turns retrograde, we might well become a little more inwardly directed. Some people may become downright introspective, but we are more inclined to review, reevaluate, reassess our absorption and communication of important information. In fact, this retrograde Mercury may well serve Tommy quite well during his time in isolation in prison, and this is because he will find it just a little bit easier to go within and build up his strength. We can see that Tommy's progressed Mars is currently around 23 degrees of Aquarius, and this means it is moving closer and closer into an exact square with his natal Jupiter. We're already within a degree of orb, and so this influence is there. We are fighting for our own beliefs. We may be standing firm on a particular issue, but the tenseness of the square may also incline us to overshoot the mark, to be impetuous, to misjudge our strength. Let's keep our eye on his natal Mars though. His progressed Sun is currently just under 18 degrees of Capricorn, and it is drawing closer and closer to a conjunction with his natal Mars. And this is an exceptionally strong aspect. By the time we get to 2026, the Sun may well be within a degree of orb, and if Tommy was born later in the day, then it would be within orb. This very powerful conjunction is going to give Tommy huge energy, immense drive. He will have the ability to tap into an enormous reservoir of inner strength. If he can just avoid acting on impulse or letting anger get in the way, then he will be able to bring big things into being. Because of the other qualities in this chart, he would be best advised not to be too rash, too overbearing, too aggressive. And I say this also because natally there is quite a tight semi-square between this Mars and his sun. And so this conjunction in the progressions is igniting something that is part of the natal promise. I did also have a quick look at the relationship between his progressed moon, which we don't have an exact degree for, and his progressed sun. The part of the lunation cycle that Tommy is in indicates that at some point in the next few years, he will be beginning a whole major new life cycle. If he was born later in the day, this new cycle would begin in 2029. But during this final phase, as the progressed moon slowly closes in on the progressed sun, we are in the balsamic phase. And so by the time Tommy is out of prison, the balsamic phase is looking very likely, and this is a time when people, situations and circumstances around us may change. Things may have to go that we'd previously taken for granted as we reorientate ourselves ready for the next major life cycle. We also know that the next UK elections have to take place by August of 2029. As it stands, Nigel Farage has been adamant that Tommy Robinson is not welcome in the Reform UK party. Whether he remains resolute on this or not is a different matter, and it is clear that Tommy Robinson does attract support. I took a quick look at the relationship between Tommy and Nigel Farage to see how that could potentially play out. Now, the composite chart between two people carefully measures the midpoint between their respective planets. It isn't actually a natal chart with a birth time as such, and it takes the view that the relationship between two people has an energy and a dynamic of its own, and that the positions and aspects of planets in the composite chart will describe the energy of the relationship. Please bear in mind that we are again not able to use an exact birth time for Tommy Robinson, and so particularly the composite moon may be out by a few degrees either way. The strength of this chart quite surprised me. Bear in mind that Nigel Farage has been firm that Tommy Robinson is not welcome in his party. If we look at the composite, we have this really close conjunction between the Sun and Jupiter, a very beneficial and lucky aspect, potentially showing that these two people can experience some contentment in a relationship, that it would benefit them both, and possibly that benefit could be a material one too, in the sense of attracting prosperity to themselves. But certainly the relationship would broaden their horizons and expand on their conscious awareness of themselves. You can see quite how many planets are drawn together in this Aquarian energy of groups, social awareness, potentially social reform, and Aquarius can have quite a political symbolism too. Moon, Mars and Mercury together would certainly lead to intense interaction and communication, possibly even downright arguments. It's a very intense energy, for better or for worse. Venus also is suggesting intense feelings, whether they are friends or enemies. There is just simply a lot of intensity in all these planets being drawn together. We do have a dash of Neptune drawn into this too, and so there might be some over-idealization of not seeing each other clearly, but I have seen far worse Neptune connections in composite charts, and certainly the composite between Tommy Robinson and Elon Musk is riddled with Neptune. There is a drawback, which is between this Saturn and the Pluto. It's showing us that this relationship may come with a lack or a shortage, something which is essential. And so if these two people find themselves in a relationship of any kind, there may be a great deal of frustration because there is this limit or lack of something, and it might make them feel restricted tied down, and these restrictions would be experienced as unwelcome. And in fact, over time, these restrictions can become so severe that the problems that arise are insurmountable. So we have two extremes operating in this composite. This bundle of planets are telling us about expansion, enjoyment of each other's company, affection even, and yet by virtue of the relationship existing, it also has to contain these huge restrictions. And as the relationship unfolded further, there could be increasing cold and distance between the two people. And so it will take a good deal of genuine honesty and a desire to keep the relationship going in order to overcome the issues brought in by Saturn and Pluto. We'll have to wait and see if anything does happen between these two men, which seems to be the advice that Elon Musk was dispensing. Nigel Farage's exact words were, "If I was to embrace, as it looks like I was being urged to do, sort of violent, thuggish people like Robinson, that would do our party immense harm." And so let's keep our eyes on Robinson and Farage and see what transpires. As you can see, next year will begin triggering off some disruptive change for Tommy Robinson, together with a great deal of energy and some fresh opportunities too. I hope you found it interesting, and I must say a big thank you to those of you who are always so positive and helpful in your comments. I know who you are, and I am very grateful. Now, because Tommy Robinson does arouse such strong opinions either way, I will have to be careful in how I respond to any of your comments on this video. I always read my comments and I try to acknowledge all of them, but please understand that if your comment is expressing a strong political opinion, I might not be able to respond without showing prejudice. And so please understand if I can't acknowledge it. Don't let that put you off commenting. You have every right to post your own civil opinions. And with that, take care, all of you. And God bless you and your families. Goodbye.